Open up a special meeting of the Willits City Council for March 26th, and have a roll call, please.
Yes. Councilmember Stransky?
Yes.
Madrigal?
Here.
Ornstein?
It's actually the 28th here.
You're right. And I'm still here.
You're still here, Mayor Burton.
So just a couple matters this morning. These microphones are for the television, and they're not to amplify everybody's voice. And this is kind of an odd layout from the way we usually conduct meetings, where we're kind of more facing each other. So I just remind people, we noticed it this morning, and when you're speaking, and we will ask speakers when we have a public comment to speak up here, but again, that microphone does not amplify, so if everybody would just do their best to speak up, and if you are failing to hear conversation that's going on up here, let me know, and we'll try and improve our projection. So that being said, today we are meeting to have a public hearing and conduct a public hearing and consider an adoption of a mitigated negative declaration on the following matter. And this is the Reach Air Medical Services base at the City of Willits' airport. And Adrian, do you have any comments to start this, or are we going to go straight to the preparer of the mitigated deck and get some of his comments?
Well, I think everybody is well aware of the project at hand for Reach Air Medical Services to establish a base up at the Willits Municipal Airport. And this would entail a long-term lease with the city for a building that they would operate out of. Obviously, being an air medical service provider, that's a 24/7 operation, and there have been concerns that have been brought to the city about that 24/7 operation, which is going to be different than the sort of hobbyists that have, and a couple of businesses that have operated out of the airport. So the purpose of this hearing today is to formally accept those public comments and receive further public comments today, and for the council to consider taking an action on the recommended mitigated negative declaration. With us today is Dave Dietz of Mead and Hunt. He's the gentleman who has done the initial study. We contracted with Mead and Hunt for this work, and so with that, I'd like to invite Dave up to address this study.
Thank you. Introductory-wise, you've received a copy of the initial study that's been circulated for public review for 30 days. You received 12 written comments. Other people may have approached you as individuals. Your packet contained the 12 letters. We've also prepared a response to comments where we went through and trying to pick out the key comments of fact or questions to help guide you in making sure you feel you've got all the information you need to reach a decision, which is intended to happen today. There are 5 points I want to make that came out of the response to comments that we prepared that I think will be some key points, both in terms of facts and interpretation. The first, unfortunately, I need to say that some of the reviewers found some errors we left in the document, so I need to tell you about those. The first one is that the residential uses immediately or closest to the proposed facility are both multifamily and they're zoned for multifamily. So those are not single family homes. The other error is the graphics and the data in the graphics in the initial study are correct. Unfortunately, both the table and the text on pages 29 and 30 do not correctly show the 1.5 flights per day average in that calculation. And they also misstate the distance of the proposed helicopter parking position in the alternate format that we're recommending as a mitigation. The correct distance, as shown in the graphic, is 150 feet from the runway. And this parking position would meet FAA setback criteria. So those are the two key errors. In terms of things that came out of the response to comments that we believe very important for you to consider, the first is we did get a letter from U.S. Fish and Wildlife, which is the agency with principal responsibility for sustaining the northern spotted owl. Their comments were two parts. One, they concluded that there were no direct impacts of the construction on the airport on the spotted owl, and they basically said no comment on the issue of impacts to overflights, which can be interpreted several different ways, obviously. But the bottom line is they did not say that anything in this action would jeopardize the species, which is key. Had they done that, that would have changed this process significantly. The next thing is, one of the submissions was a letter from a wildlife biologist named Richard Tanner. Several of the letters attached that as a additional information. And what I would say is there's one peculiar thing on this that basically undoes the value of what would otherwise have been a very useful document. He clearly is an experienced wildlife biologist with significant knowledge on the northern spotted owl. Unfortunately, his noise analysis, which is the issue for the spotted owl, the potential for noise disturbance by helicopter overflights, his analysis was not based upon the actual helicopter that's going to come there. For whatever reason, he chose an entirely different helicopter made by Sikorsky, a much older helicopter that weighs 3 times as much and has over 4 times the carrying capacity of the helicopter being used by Reach. And so the noise signature of that helicopter is completely irrelevant to this analysis. There's no connection to the project. So what we'd say is the information contained in that cannot be judged a fair argument that there's a difference among experts on the potential for impact of the spotted owl, because that's fatally flawed by having used the wrong helicopter in the noise analysis. And the final point, one of the letters presents information from several noise studies that were conducted at hospital helipads, and then some of the letters have suggested that noise studies need to be made. It's important to see the distinction between a hospital helipad, which is basically an airport writ small, that's going to be in an isolated area not near an airport. Those very commonly have noise studies. Helicopter operations on an existing airport very rarely have any sort of noise studies because there's an existing airport there. This is merely adding to it. It's not a brand new facility in an area that otherwise did not have an airfield. So those are the 5 key points I have. Obviously, there's a lot of reading material, response to comments, and at this point I turn it back to you for any comments that the council may have or questions, and then I can be available to help answer any questions that the public may have.
Thank you, Dave. Do we have any comments from the council?
I do just have a question about the process. Will we accept, if we accept the comments as written, for example, changing the wording for the fish and game item, that then becomes part of the official record?
Yes, I think what you say on that one is that you would like to accept that as a change to the initial study. The other comments you merely just accept.
Okay.
Thank you for the information. It's part of things for you to consider. The only one for which you do need to get into the record, or I would recommend you get into the record, if you share my conclusion that the report by Richard Tanner would not be judged a fair argument, that there were disagreement among experts on impacts of the spotted owl, that would be a very useful thing to have in the record. I believe it to be true. It is my professional opinion. But if you believe that also to be true, that would be useful to have in the findings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Getting into the study itself, and I guess that's where we're going right now, I noticed that you didn't take into account on the noise contours, they're called. You didn't take into account the trees that are located between the helipad or the parking pad and the buildings. Is there a ballpark value that you can apply that would address that?
Noise is messy. Let me tell you what the model did do, and then I'll tell you what the model didn't do and whether it's interesting or not, and sort of what do you do with the fact that the model doesn't do everything one might want. When we modeled this, we did include all of the terrain. So the effect of shielding for some sites, to the extent it has to do with the actual terrain, the earth, that's accommodated. Flight tracks, both their horizontal and vertical component are in there for all the mix of aircraft. Those were all based upon the fact that we've been doing planning at the airport. We know where the fixed wing are, and in talking with the chief pilot, With Reach, we know where they will fly, and also the variations on where they may fly. So all of that is in the model. What the model doesn't do, it doesn't include both the shielding and other acoustical effects of buildings, trees, or things other than the earth itself. Buildings can both act as a wall, a sound wall. They can also, depending upon their how their sides are oriented compared to an off-airport receptor, one of the residences, for example, it can bounce it. So it will change as you walk down the airport's perimeter what effect the buildings will have. Trees look like they're very solid objects, and you think a row of trees would have a huge effect on noise. Unfortunately, they're not continuous, as dense as some of the plantings there are. Studies in Europe that are big on forests near communities, because some of them are very, very old, you usually have to have at least 100-foot depth of closely packed trees to get much noise benefit. Now, depending upon the window, where your window on a house and other things might be, you might get a very localized noise benefit in terms of some blocking. But it's not continuous and it's not uniform. So it would be very difficult to model that in the abstract. You would have to walk around with the sound meter and model it in the real world. And that's why, for example, in hospital helipads, when they're trying to figure out what the use would be, they often will operate some aircraft there on a temporary basis and take readings in the neighborhood, you know, that the hospital might be in, because modeling is not sophisticated enough to deal with the effect of shape of the terrain and other things like that. So I guess my explanation here is basically, I think given how narrow the airport is, the noise contours are likely very close to reality as it would be experienced, because there aren't enough trees to block it, and there are not enough buildings to make a continuous wall, and none of them are tall enough that the reverberation issue is probably significant. And again, unless you measure that in the field, there's no way to absolutely know.
So the assumption is 0.
We believe it's very close to 0 in terms of both negative and positive effects of buildings and trees.
And it did, those noise levels were still within the acceptable criteria?
Yes, we use, land use compatibility is typically done with a cumulative metric, which sounds gobbledygook, but basically it means is they sum up all the noise that occurs over a year-long period, and this is an average day. And that is typically used in land use compatibility planning for airports. That is was adopted by the Mendocino County Airport Land Use Commission, and it was their threshold criteria that we used in this analysis. And because the initial run with the helicopter parking position and the originally proposed position would have pushed the 60 cine noise contour over the adjacent residences, we suggested moving it back closer to the runway, and that shift of about, what is it, 180 feet, I'd have to look at the number, but order of magnitude, a significant shift is just enough to pull that noise contour back to the property line.
Do we have any further questions here of the council before we
Yeah,
open?
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time or not, so let me throw them out. If it's not the appropriate time, I'll
Okay.
wait. But we're talking about mitigations.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is this the time to talk about that, or later, or what?
Well, I guess we see the need for only one mitigation to make this project eligible for a mitigated negative declaration and to avoid the need for an environmental impact report, and that is the shifting of the pad. And that fully addresses all of the noise impact potential to the residential. Our conclusion is the noise analysis we did for the northern spotted owl was done for a worst-case basis. We worked with Reach's chief pilot to model flight tracks directly over the 3 sites that have been documented and try to come up with a scenario on why would the helicopter be arriving and departing based on a particular direction. And we modeled worst case for all of those. The conclusion was outside, well outside the noise levels established by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that was the threshold for an effect. Additionally, 2 of the sites are in areas that are commonly overflown by fixed-wing aircraft and have been since the airport was founded. The other is a little more obscure, is going to be randomly overflown by fixed-wing and potentially by the helicopter, depending upon where they're arriving or from or departing to.
All right, so basically, from what I understand from reading the report, is that I don't want to say modifying, but directing the flight path in and out in a certain direction will act as a mitigation in most cases.
Well, let's be real clear. Nothing in this is redirecting the flight of the helicopter. It's merely changing where the parking position is on the airport.
Okay.
It is-
So how do we address that then? Because that will be a factor. I guess that's up to the REACH people, or?
Well, let me give you some facts. It is outside the legal prerogative of the city to direct the flight paths of aircraft. That is exclusively reserved for the Federal Aviation
You might
Administration.
want to speak up on this.
Oh, I'm sorry. It is outside the city's ability to legally direct any aircraft flying to and from their airport on where they're allowed to fly. The FAA reserves that authority. And even the FAA does not, as the slang goes, get in the cockpit with the pilot. They will establish guidelines for when somebody will make turns. They will have guidance for how high the aircraft should be when approaching the airport. But even the flight controllers at an air traffic control tower do not tell the pilot exactly how to fly. Even in the tiniest single-seat airplane, the pilot there is just like the captain of an ocean liner. They are the captain of that ship. They have authority and responsibility for it. There are standards for how they need to fly, but nobody's going to say you have to turn here. It may not be safe. There may be turbulence going on. There may be other issues the pilot has to consider. So even the FAA doesn't tell pilots where to fly. There may be noise abatement routes that are recommended. That's something that certainly, if there turns out to be an operational issue, that could be negotiated with REACH. They operate on lots of airports, presumably they're very sensitive to this issue, but it would have to be a negotiated agreement that the REACH pilot felt was safe. You can't ask them to fly unsafe. You can't, violate the laws of physics, and you certainly can't, as a city, direct them on how to fly. You could certainly facilitate a discussion if something shocks and it turns up after they've started their operations there.
But on that subject, there have been meetings in the past where representatives from REACH have acknowledged, and I don't want to speak for REACH obviously, but they've acknowledged that there are things that they can and do intend to do as far as mitigating, the approach and departure. Am I speaking out of turn?
It would be voluntary. In other words, that would be something that as good pilots, good business people, they say, we can do this, it's still safe and prudent for us to do this. So that would be an ongoing operational thing you could do. It's not just now, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, to try and make sure that they are, the best neighbors they can be to the people who live near the airport.
Well, I guess where I'm trying to go here is, as a public official trying to, address concerns of the public. And, within the parameters that we can't, and we're not about to tell REACH how to fly their helicopters, there was an understanding, or at least an indication, that they're aware of the issues and they had intended to take whatever steps, and I'm not sure if it's appropriate. Well, it probably is appropriate for REACH to speak to that,
Yeah.
I would think.
They would be the best source for that.
I'd like to first move this into the public comment period. And then if we have issues that come up through that process that we would like some clarification and REACH, and we don't get involved in a back and forth discussion until we've concluded the testimony that's going to be provided. Adrian?
So I need to have you officially open a public
I
hearing.
am going to
Okay,
do that.
great.
Yeah. I'll do that. So at this point, seeing no more comments or questions from the council for the repair of the negative deck, I would open the public hearing on this matter. If anybody would like to make comments, please come up to the podium, sign in, and state your name for the record, and share with us. Are we running the time clock today?
Yes.
Is it set at 3 or 5 minutes?
It's set at 3. We can do it whatever length you want.
So we'll try 3. If it seems to be inadequate, we might stretch it to 5. I don't see a large group of people here that looks like we're going to be here for hours and hours on this part, so my intent is not to stifle people's ability to make comments. Yes?
My name is Kay Wright, and reach is actually going to be in my backyard practically. And I just wonder if there's going to be a day where the helicopter that's actually going to be used will come up so we can hear the noise and see just what it's like. Would that be possible?
You want us to answer from the podium, sir?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that ensures that these comments will be on the public record and in the microphone, and from across the room, it might not connect.
I just didn't want the.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. And introduce yourself, please.
No problem. My name is Anna Blair. I'm Vice President of Business Relations at REACH. I love your question, first off. With the community, we absolutely want to do whatever we can prior to placing this space in and going active to make sure that the expectations of what it's going to be like and what it's going to feel like to the residents is we want to work collaboratively as much as possible. So the request of bringing the exact type of aircraft up is absolutely within the realm of something we would be willing to do, just for the experience of that aircraft.
Thank you. Do we have other public comments? Please don't be shy, because I'm not one that extends and really begs for public comments. If you have something to say, I really encourage you to come up, or I'll close it.
I'm Ramona Waldman.
And please speak up.
Ramona Waldman. My question, I was a little confused, is the mitigated parking position 150 feet from the center line or 210 feet from the center line? I'm confused about that.
Dave, can you
It is
respond?
150. The
100.
graphic is correct, the text is
Oh,
wrong.
God, that changes everything, you know.
Well, no, and it was an extraordinarily awkward error on our part. I'm deeply aware of that.
Well,
That page was a mess.
a mess. Agreed.
That's the
Okay,
fact.
well, thank you. And so that can be, that's going to be measured, it's going to be right outside the, what do they call that? The no object zone, one,
Yeah.
right there, okay.
Yes. It's as close to the runway as you can get at VFAC.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Ron Moorhead. I'm a resident of Brook Trails, and I am very positive about this situation. I'd like to see REACH move here. As a former fire officer, I understand the importance of speed, and it makes a big difference. And those individuals that are against this situation, I just hope that they never ever actually need to use the service. If you live up there, you knew that was an airport. That airport's been up there since 1960, early 60s, when they moved it from down the valley. It is important to have the airport. As a former member of the Chamber of Commerce here, I know that having an airport in the area is important for commerce and other industry, which we just had a meeting about the importance of bringing industry, small industry, cottage industry into the town. The airport's going to be important. And when you look at the REACH situation with our new hospital, I just feel that it's very important. And the slight little problem that we might have, or perceived problem of a little increased noise, I can live with that. And I personally know that I put people on helicopters, and they can live with it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Any other comments?
Hello, Tom Woodhouse. I'm the Mendocino County Supervisor for this area. And I'm here to specifically thank the council and the staff for their support of this project. I appreciate your courage, and it's very important for this part of the county, and we have a lot of heroes. The heroes that are here today are here on their own time and not being paid, and they're going to protect our volunteer fire people, ambulance people, and any of us that are injured. And it's very important. I appreciate the time you're taking very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will also be ground zero for complaints, supervisor complaints. Brook Trails in my area, my number's the one you call if things aren't going right, and I will be working with Anna to try to resolve things. So it's
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Pete Swanton. I'm a resident of Willits. Very much in favor of Reach coming up to the airport. A few things that come to mind. I go up to the airport and I see maybe 1 or 2 airplanes sitting up there. That's a taxpayer-supported airport, and it's greatly underutilized. For us to say no to the other end of my point, a business, we coming into the airport, especially a business of this caliber, is just unacceptable. It's something that we really feel like we have to do. The airport is very underutilized, and this would be a really good, they'd be a good catalyst for getting things moving and getting some activity and energy going up there, and maybe using it for what it's meant to be used for. It's it's really underutilized. It's not, the taxpayers would be greatly, enhanced by, appreciate the use of that airport because, right now, their tax dollars aren't really being spent well. So getting other, business like this to go in up there, I think is key. So those are the 2 points I'd like to make.
Thank you, sir.
Can we ask questions of the people?
I'm taking comments right now. We're going to stay with that. If you have a follow-up question, you'll be allowed to make a follow-up question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Ralph Waldman. I got a question for Dave Peeps, and that's the FAA approval of the position 100 feet from the runway. At about 170 feet farther, another 20 feet farther west from the runway, I'd say 170 feet is about where the 7-to-1 transitional surface begins. The helicopter is 11.5 feet tall, so it's going to be penetrating the transitional surface when it's sitting there. That's right?
The airspace that he's referring to is for fixed objects. There are different standards for aircraft parking and aircraft maneuvering, but it's a very good question.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I saw one more hand for someone that hadn't spoken yet, or am I missing that? So second, third, and last call.
My name's Carol Sid, and Kay Wright is my tenant. So I own the property where she lives, so the helicopter will be in the backyard of my property. I'm very concerned about the fact that I won't be able to rent my property in the future because someone will say, well, there's a helicopter right behind me and I don't really want to rent that. I'll go look somewhere else. We've owned these properties. My husband built these properties. They're very nice rentals. We've never had a problem renting them. The airport is not an issue. It's utilized to its potential, I think, for what it is right now. It's a nice, quiet airport. It's not busy. My tenants have always told me that the weekends are the busiest time. It's more like a hobby type place. Now, if this is changing, that's fine. I'm not against the helicopter business at all. I think that it's definitely needed. You guys have saved my butt before, so I'm totally for you guys. The only thing I'm worried about is my property values going down, my rentals not being able to be full because of the noise. If there's a way that you can move it farther away from my property, that's what I'd like to see. But I'm not against it. I think it's a good thing for our community and all that, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jerry?
Obviously, Jerry Gonzalez, the chief of police. Ron Moorhead brought up the benefit to the fire department, and I also sit on the fire board, but I also have to look at the airport from a security standpoint. Yes, it is kind of a hobby at this point, but we do have security concerns up there, and having 24-hour reach folks up there, whether it be their mechanics or their employees up there, will make it a little easier for me, because we do go up and patrol the airport, and it does give us a little more of a presence up there. Some folks that I can count on. I worked with Reach in the past, and keeping an open line of communication with these folks is going to be important for us, from safety issues, emergency planning issues, but you're going to have a good neighbor up there also keeping an eye on your property.
Thank you. Did we have a follow-up question that wanted to be asked? Because it looks to me like I'm about to close the public hearing. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to
Would you come up to the podium just again so we have a good vocal record?
I wanted to ask Pete Swanton if he's a pilot.
I am.
Okay, that should be noted. You know, that you
Okay.
have an advantage to keeping the, you know.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers?
I do a follow-up.
I shouldn't have opened that door.
I'll be short. Well, for me, for short. I just wanted to follow up with the chief said. I live up in that neighborhood as well, and I can tell you that these folks, a lot of them are ex-military, a lot of them are also first responders. If you have an issue up there, if we have an issue with security, they're going to be there too. So it's going to be really nice to have that experience or have that someone there that at least is willing to jump in and help out. I worry about it because from the standpoint of my family, the sheriff's department, we love them, but they're 25 minutes away. Thankfully, Jerry and his crew come up there every once in a while. So from a security standpoint, that's good too.
Thank you. So I'm prepared to close the public hearing. So the public hearing is closed. I'm going to bring it back to the city. Holly, do you have a follow-up question? You care to make a motion?
Well, I don't. I would love guidance on the motion, but what I'm seeing, obviously the comments will be accepted in their entirety, you know, the comments and the responses. But yeah, I believe there's 5 identified changes that would need to be incorporated, and Mr. D's telling me if this is correct. The comment number 1, which is the change in wording that the Fish and Game would like to see, I would like to see that applied to our study. Comment number 4 was the change to multifamily.
Correct.
Comment number 5 was making the graphic and the chart consistent.
Correct.
Having to do with the placement of the helicopter. Number 4 was noting the discrepancy in Mr. Tanner's analysis that he used a different type of helicopter and that is therefore not valid. And then wasn't there a 5th one?
Not a fair argument.
Not a fair argument.
Got to keep the attorneys happy.
And was there a 5th?
Yes, it was the 150 feet. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that
Thank
would
you.
be that whole page 29 and 30, the chart and the references.
Yeah, making it consistent. I'm sorry. So making it consistent, but also noting the 150 feet and also noting the 1.5 average flights per day, not the single flight per day.
The 150 ought to be as a clarification of the mitigation measure 12.1.
Correct. And I'm seeing a.
We have one additional comment, and I don't know if you closed that period, one of our staff is also, if you wanted to speak as a resident, make a comment.
Yeah, well, we'll take it as a professional comment from the applicant.
I apologize. I'm not speaking in behalf of REACH. I'm actually a transition Coast Guard officer, and I'm from Willits. I live in Brook Trails. I actually live just a little bit to the west of the airport. And, being in the Coast Guard for 20 years and having the opportunity just to be a public servant for 20 years, one of the biggest things I was concerned about is where I was going to go afterwards and be able to do some of the same things. And I looked through many of the different helicopter companies, and one of the best things that attracted me to REACH is it's a family-oriented company. And you have all these questions, and these are all questions that I would have brought up too, being a resident of Brook Trails. They're great questions, but one thing I found in coming, I've not only brought in as a family there, but they were addressing concerns like this right away, like noise abatement and things like that. And one thing they don't want to do, which attracted me then, why I wanted to go back so bad to REACH, is that it's a family-oriented company. I feel like, just like I did in the Coast Guard at REACH now, and they brought me in as a family. So just wanted to say, it's a great, I'm proud to be a part of REACH as an organization, just like I was proud to serve my country. And I feel like now I'm going to be able to continue in my hometown, getting the opportunity, which there aren't a lot of ways to come back to Willits as a youth of Willits, and this has provided me that opportunity, so I just want to throw that out.
Well, thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Hear, hear.
So, would
As a
somebody
youth of Willits, I agree.
ready to so was I, but it seems like I was a ways back now.
So I would be happy to make a motion, but I would like guidance on what that motion looks like.
So I'm going to have Dave jump in here, but what the recommended action is that you adopt a mitigated negative declaration, and that will incorporate the 5 corrections that Dave mentioned earlier to the initial study. And it will specifically reference Dave Dietz's professional opinion that Richard Tanner's noise contours are not relevant to the study and therefore do not present a fair argument, and that there are no significant effects on the environment in adopting this.
That
I
are
make-
not mitigated.
That are not
mitigated. I would like to
Kath-
make that motion.
Kathy, have you got it?
Yep.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Any further comment?
Yeah, I'd like to put something in because this is a public hearing and we have heard comments from some members of the public who are concerned about primarily the noise. So I've said this before in other meetings and I'll say it again. I might be the only person in this room other than the helicopter crews who have an intimate association with the air ambulance. I live in a house that's about 500 feet from the new helipad at the new hospital, and maybe about a quarter of a mile or so from the existing helipad at the fire station on Beckville Road. And one of the features of living where I live is that I am directly under the flight path of every helicopter that comes and goes to that landing pad. So I have intimate, close and personal knowledge of what it sounds like and what it feels like to live near a helicopter operation. And yeah, it gets noisy, but it's brief, and in the overall scheme of things, it's not a big deal. I have been awakened at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I lift my head from the pillow and I say, some poor guy is being helped. And I go back to sleep. That's it. So, by the way, the housing development that is located next to the hospital, I don't want to characterize it as, I want to be careful, but, they are not inexpensive homes. And ever since the hospital construction began, and this big old helipad is sitting there, everybody knows, everybody who lives in the development and who is buying a house in the development, they know there's a helicopter that's going to be landing there. And yet, in the past 2 years since the construction of the hospital has begun, the houses are selling. People are buying the houses. So if you're concerned about the property values of your house or the ability to rent your apartments, I wouldn't be concerned about that. And that's demonstrated by the fact that the housing development is being built, and people are spending a lot of money to buy those houses. So I think it's important that everybody, understand and realize having a helicopter as a neighbor is not a big deal. And I for one, appreciate it.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Councilmember Stransky?
Yes.
Madrigal?
Yes.
Ornstein?
Yes.
Mayor Burton?
Absolutely. Motion passes 4-0. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Second?
Yep.
We also need to authorize this and allow staff. This was just approving.
If we believe that specific direction is needed because staff would be unclear on that, I would be happy to ask someone to make that.
I think it's important to have that on the record.
Okay.
The direction would be what? That's required?
To authorize staff to move forward with
A lease agreement.
a lease agreement with Reach Air Medical Services.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Another roll call vote.
Councilmember
Yes.
Stransky? Madrigal?
Yes.
Ornstein?
Yes.
Mayor Burton?
Yes. Thank you for that clarification. We don't do these every day. Can we adjourn now? Thank you. Take motion and a second. Same one, all in
Same
favor?
ones. Aye.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today and helping us with